Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. So if everybody could take their seats, please. We still have a few people rolling in. Okay. So welcome everybody. We are really glad that you're here to hear information on data centers and how they affect our water. My name is Kathy Peregrino, and I am a member of the Coalition for Responsible Data Center Development. A little over 1 year ago, I lived about a half mile from where the Farmington hyperscale data center is scheduled to be built. Since then, I've moved about 7.5 miles away, but remain very active with the Coalition. Why? Because the Jordan Aquifer that supplies our water does not have boundaries. The resulting air pollution, soaring electricity costs, and environmental degradation will affect everyone in this community and beyond. It's important that people understand the impact on all of us. Tonight we have two special guests, Dr. Carrie Jennings, Research and Policy Director at Freshwater, and Feshami. I will introduce them to you by telling you a little bit about each of our presenters. Carrie Jennings is dedicated to translating science to policy and action to preserve water. She is the Research and Policy Director at Freshwater, a 54-year-old Minnesota nonprofit with a mission to inspire and empower people to protect water. A licensed professional geologist, she applies her understanding of geology and hydrogeology to policy to improve groundwater sustainability and reduce surface water pollution. Previously, she worked at the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, the DNR, and was responsible for scientific and technical standards for groundwater availability and sensitivity maps and reports. In her 24-year field geologist career at the Minnesota Geological Survey, she mapped the glacial sediment layers in half the state and published 28 maps and 35 articles on their origins, as well as their fundamental control on land use and water quality. Carrie is adjunct faculty at the University of Minnesota in Earth and Environmental Sciences, where she has taught glacial geology for 30 years. Feshami has over 40 years of experience in information technology, with the majority of that as a telecommunications and data center network architect for Fortune 500 companies, including several in Minnesota. That experience has given him insights into cloud services providers like Amazon AWS, Microsoft Azure, and data center operations and critical resources they consume. He holds a BS in electrical engineering from Virginia Tech University. His interest in impact of hyperscale data centers began when the city of Farmington approved plans to spot zone a hyperscale data center in the middle of long-established residential neighborhoods near his family's home. Let's give Dr. Carrie Jennings and Feshami a warm welcome.
Take this out. Okay, let's get going then. Thank you very much, Kathy. I want to talk to you a little bit about what Freshwater does. First of all, if you haven't heard about us, you might have gotten our calendar, the Weather Guide calendar, but we do kind of 3 pillars of work: water research, water policy, and then engagement, education, and kind of community empowerment. And then what our director likes to say is we try to coordinate across sectors in Minnesota and bring the right people together. So we have a couple of projects going on right now that have to do with data centers. I'll allude to those later on. I want to just make sure we have a level playing field to start with and that everybody understands what groundwater is. Who was that? There's Trout Unlimited folks here, and I spoke to you the week of Christmas. I got a couple, 1, 2. Okay, I thought it was just the guys with hats on, but it's more. Vests and hats. Okay, so groundwater, this kind of cartoon illustrates that the ground beneath us is saturated. If we had gotten a little more rain, it would have tamped down the dust, soaked into the ground, and entered the water table. And that's kind of what this is showing. You saturate the upper layer. And then you can also get groundwater into deeper layers that are more difficult. This also shows you that a lake or a river is just the expression of the groundwater table at the surface where there's a slate hole. So lakes are not bowls that hold water, they are outcrops of the water table. Groundwater began as precipitation, or in Minnesota, a lot of it began as the melt of the glaciers that were here. And then it seeps into the pore spaces of sediment and rock. And we kind of consider something an aquifer if those pore spaces are well connected and we can move water through them easily. So an aquifer is just something where the pores are connected. In this part of Minnesota, it's rare to have large open caverns holding groundwater. There's a few places in southeast where there are caves, but we don't think of groundwater as being underground rivers. That's kind of a fallacy. Groundwater, because it's insulated by the earth above it, is kind of insulated from seasonal temperature changes, so it kind of equilibrates to the average annual temperature. I have a ground source geothermal system at my house, and it's about 47 degrees, the water coming into the house. So that's what our groundwater temperature is, and that's important for trout fishermen because when you have 47-degree water emerging at the surface, it's warm in the winter, it's going to be melting the snow, but it's going to be that cold spot in the spring and summer that the fish appreciate. So groundwater can be connected to surface water features like the lakes I showed you, perennial streams that are flowing all the time. If they're not perennial streams, then they are not connected to the groundwater system. Wetlands and springs. And then deeper water might be confined by layers that are impermeable, so something clayey like a shale layer or something. So water might be entering this zone from somewhere where that comes to the surface, or it might just have taken a long time to get there. It might have entered that zone when there was a glacier half a mile thick sitting on top of it, forcing that water deeper. So we do have confined aquifers in Minnesota as well. And sometimes those are under pressure just from the weight of the earth above it and the slope of the earth, and so they might actually be artesian wells that flow at the surface. The age of water, or how long its residence time is, it can be today's water, or it can be the age of the glaciers that were here. I was giving a talk at North Mankato recently and looked at the age dating for their water, and it was 60,000 years old. So you can have quite old water that entered the ground, you know, can you still show cavemen? Is that appropriate? So it entered the ground a long time ago. We had a project that was funded by a foundation based in Chicago, the Joyce Foundation, that likes to engage in governance, and they wanted us to they wanted to move into the groundwater governance area. They wanted to understand of the states in the Great Lakes region, who was governing their groundwater quantity, who had rules in place to make sure that water was going to be used sustainably. So I want to just make sure you understand the governance, how we, with our institutions at various jurisdictional levels, establish the laws and policies to manage this shared resource. And I'll just have to say, shared resource management is one of the harder things to do, because when things move across boundaries, it's really hard. Political boundaries, it's hard to come up with rules. Groundwater management is what our state agencies do. This is the implementation of the laws and policies that we put into place. So I just told you there's not a lot going on as far as laws and or maybe I didn't say that yet. We don't have a lot going on as far as laws and policies to manage shared groundwater. We look to our agencies right now to help us, but they don't have the tools, the legal tools, to do that very well. So groundwater governance. To start with groundwater governance, you really need to understand the groundwater science. What are the geologic layers that are hosting the water? How fast is that moving? And then you have to understand, you have to create some legal instruments then to regulate and protect it. That usually is translated to a permitting process. That's what is at the state agency level. Like if a large water user wants to use water from a high capacity well, they get a permit from the Department of Natural Resources. And then there should be stakeholder participation at some point. And this is the part that's usually missing in most conversations. Stakeholders are usually only engaged by voting, or maybe the Dakota County Groundwater Plan, if you participated in that. But a lot of times when it's a topic like this, it's kind of esoteric, or that you have other more pressing needs in your life, it's hard to engage. You don't know, you don't go to that well testing clinic, or you don't go to the session at the library. But I'm glad you're here, because this is part of that. So we were working across this region on groundwater governance with the funding from the Joyce Foundation, a group of us that spanned the region, to describe the system of governance, see if it was adequate, and who was actually producing the knowledge in each state. And then they funded us to do another 2 years of work where we hosted conversations in groundwater scarce regions in northern Wisconsin, the Chicago suburbs, where it was shared across 3 states, and then we were in Scott County. And so this all felt very academic when we were doing it, but at the end of this project, data centers came up. And then people were like, oh, we need to talk to you because you understand what needs to be put in place so that we can make sure that these companies aren't sucking out all the groundwater that we share with them. So I started probably giving a talk a week over the last year about just groundwater governance. The problem was last year that the speed of business, the competitive nature of this business was very fast, and it was quiet. People were coming in and trying to be the first in line because the resources, at least the electricity, was going to be somewhat limited. So the speed of business was faster than the speed of policy. So last year in January, not this past January, the year before, it was clear that we were a target nationally for water-intensive industries. And so here's where I want to expand the conversation beyond data centers, because I think there's other industries that might be coming our way that are already here, bottling plants, or sustainable aviation fuel that are also water intensive. And Dakota County is kind of that sweet spot on the edge of the metro, adequate transportation, adequate power. So it's a place where a lot of these places were looking. 20 cities last year were approached, and most of those moved quickly under non-disclosure agreements, and you know this. We were confused though in 2025 when we started getting calls from places like Hampton. You know, it's just like, what? Hampton, really? Poor little Hampton. Or these 3 towns around Rochester, Byron, Lewiston, and Stewartville. It's just like, what is in common here? They were thinking about electricity. They didn't know what they didn't know. They thought, especially down here in Olmsted County, they don't have a metropolitan council. They don't have a 7-county planning agency. Nobody's doing regional planning in southeast Minnesota the way they do in the metro. So they were just like, shouldn't somebody be in charge here? And we're like, there is no entity that's in charge. These locations didn't make sense to us until we looked at this map, let me back up a little bit, of grid capacity and fiber optic networks. And then once you looked at the data center proposals, you realized they were from Becker to North Mankato to Byron, Pine Island. They're all on these high capacity transmission lines. So the companies really needed the electric first, and Hampton's on one of these as well too. So that explained, at least in our mind, what the siting was about. Electricity first, assuming the water is going to be there. So it created this tension that we've been dealing with ever since. You know, how do we balance the economic development that the city managers feel they need to have because their budgets are tight and they need to balance, they need to find some kind of income to balance. It's either rooftops or industry, so how do they have this balance and ensure the future water for their communities at the same time, sustainable water. So what we saw is that typical development process last year was our Department of Employment and Economic Development, which is a state agency and has kind of regional zones, people in each region. They were helping cite the industries projects when they came to the state. And the people were coming here, the industries were coming here because we were offering tax incentives for them to come. And that's true across the Midwest. The state level tax incentives were driving the industries here. DEED was citing them, but we're not really involving water planners. And then the cities were approached directly. And the cities were just looking at land use, maybe power. Most of the time they weren't looking at water. They signed the NDAs really early so that they felt reluctant to talk to any of the state agencies that might have the information that could answer some of their planning questions. A lot of times the NDAs might have just been about which parcel of land they were considering, but it made them reluctant to talk to state agencies about anything. And then when the agreement was reached, the project went public, and that's when you all show up at the city council meetings, that's when the protests start, that's when people start to get very upset. And this might be the first time the state agencies are aware of this, like the Department of Natural Resources or the county might be learning of it at this stage too. and they have their own concerns, but they haven't been engaged in the process. They've been bypassed. This was last year what was happening. So you get all these reactions, legal action, the developer pulls out, and then if it does go forward, you can have possible adverse outcomes because they haven't considered water and the potential for well interference with the private citizens. So this is just a non-existing governance system. Somehow they were able to bypass the authority of the DNR as the permitter of water appropriation by going straight to the cities, who have a 10-year kind of number that they're working with, and they felt like they had some slop, some extra in that 10-year number, and they were going to be able to sell that to the industry. So backing out, what laws do we have? Well, we do have a priority of use that is unique. We don't, none of the other states in that region I showed you in the Great Lakes have this statute. So we make sure that domestic water supply and power producers with contingency plans have first dibs on the water. And then small water users, that's all of your private wells, less than 10,000 gallons per day. Then agricultural irrigation and processing of agricultural products, because we larger users, but we care about their ability to be able to produce food. Then power production without approved plans, and then other uses that are large, in excess of 10,000 gallons a day, and then non-essential uses of water. I always think of car washing or something. So this is really where industrial uses should fall that aren't associated with agriculture. But instead, by going straight to the municipal supply, they were confusing this order and jumping in line. There was some attempts to kind of fix things last session. Nothing has passed this session. There's some bills introduced this session. Nothing's going to come through, I don't think. But last session, people were quite concerned, and so there was going to be some early coordination with all the state agencies. That's Minnesota Business First Stop. And there's a new definition of what a large-scale data center is. It's over 100 megawatts or 100 million gallons per year. So there's a new higher use category. And those people have to have a pre-application process now with the DNR. So the DNR is not saying yes or no, but is able to review their water, potential water appropriation now. And so there is more transparency in water and energy use, and where we kind of fall short is we're just encouraging conservation and encouraging renewable energy. So it's a stopgap measure. It's not as far as the legislators who introduced this wanted it to go. And this is bipartisan, by the way. I know that Drew Roach was working on this with Christy Purcell in Northfield, and they're kind of opposite ends of the political spectrum. It might be the only issue they agree on. So the issues that we see with these are that these projects move faster than water planners can react. We need to share this data. Farmington, Lakeville, Apple Valley, Rosemont, Cannon Falls, we all need to be sharing our plans, but we're not, often because it's competitive. The short-term incentives are attractive. We've convened city managers from all the cities that are in southeast Minnesota that are potentially hosting data centers like Pine Island and Faribault, and they look, by the way, they look harried. They're really stressed, but they also are looking at the budget and looking at the math, and they see these short-term incentives that are financial. They're more attractive than the long-term sustainability question. They're not engaging the community because of those NDAs. And in fact, we've even heard comments like, I'm a city, why should I talk to that township that's next to me? So they don't, they see their boundaries, their political boundaries as very strict. And they don't see that their stakeholder group includes people beyond their city boundaries. I think that's just, they're trying to manage their stress. So what questions, if in a perfect world, what questions should be asked before a data center is built? I'm going to go through these. The distribution of usable groundwater, who's already using it, how much are they using, that's important, including the environment. Are there other concerns with high groundwater pumping or high groundwater use? What are the societal priorities, or how do you find out what they are? And then are there alternatives to using groundwater? So since we are working across this region, my maps are the whole region, and you're lucky because you're in a zone of Minnesota that's not white. If you were in that part of Minnesota that's white, you wouldn't have any bedrock aquifers. You have quartzite or granite or something that doesn't have porosity to hold water. It might have water and fractures, but if you're in that part of Minnesota that, you know, that's over there in Nicollet County, beyond there, you have to find something in this map, which is the glacial sediment that's on top of the bedrock out there. And luckily, it does get quite thick. These are in meters, so you know, you got like 600, 900 feet of sediment in some places. Hopefully there's a sand layer somewhere in that stack. But if we look more closely at Dakota County, I'm having trouble seeing Dakota County. I can't see the boundaries. We're in here. We are lucky enough to be in these units that are basically stacks of ocean rocks. If you are in the sandstone, St. Peter sandstone sticks out on Highway 3 just north of Castle Rock. You know, there's a curve in the road there and there's some white sand on either side. That's the St. Peter sandstone. If you go east towards Randolph, where you have those, or Stanton, where that little airport is, where you have those flat top hills, then you've got a little bit of the Platteville limestone, like this brick layer. It's a harder rock that is holding up those hills and very flat on the surface. The sides are sandstone. So you have layers of limestone and sandstone alternating in this stack. Sandstone's yellow, limestone is blue. And all of those host water. So that's nice. They are sometimes separated by little muddy layers and sometimes seams of siltier layers that hang up the water a little bit. But for the most part, those layers are fairly well connected. And if we zoom in on the Dakota County map from the Minnesota Geological Survey, Farmington's right here. You're all in this blue area. So I heard somebody say Jordan. The Prairie du Chien and the Jordan, blue and there's a yellow beneath it, are the first rock unit you would encounter if you were to dig down here. And those, so your first bedrock layer is hosting water. And most of your wells in this area look like they are in this combined aquifer. Let me just show you on this column. These two right here, Shakopee and Oneota, which is collectively called the Prairie du Chien group. You might get some nice little shell fossils. And in this column, I cut it in half. This is the column that's represented in your part of, and I just want you to look at which layers are blue and where the brownish orangey ones are, because this is sand, the St. Peter sandstone. It's got a few little seams of the brown. The blue means it's an aquifer hosting water. Water's moving freely through it. And then you get into zones that are brown where there's a little bit of a confining layer. So there's, within the Oneota dolomite, there's a little bit of a more tightly packed layer. So that's this. I'm going to show you what your glacial sediment looks like now. I don't know if I have a, well, this is what your glacial sediment looked like 14,000 years ago. There was a glacier parked over on I-35. I live in Eureka Township. It was just a little west of me. It was kind of like the frontage road, Pillsbury, right east of I-35. That was the ice margin. And then the Vermillion River watershed was created by water that was moving off the front of that glacier in a big, flat, braided stream system like this. You are, well, I guess I have a circle here. This is Mankato, this is Twin Cities. So you are here, whoops. Oh, the edge, the glacier, can you tell where the glacier went? Yeah, so it's like somebody dragged their fingers through the frosting. And I-35 basically follows this boundary, north-south. And so as you go like towards New Prague or Lonsdale, it starts to get really bumpy, really hilly. And that's the edge of the last ice. And then the Vermillion River watershed, that's not a very good circle, but it's in that general area. And here is the headwaters. So here's what I'm saying is the edge of the ice. I think you can still see that. Here's kind of the more clear trough. And there's a big wide zone of moraine material. But this is the Cannon River, and this is the Strait River. So this is Faribault right here. And this is like the Cannon Waterville chain of lakes. Have you located yourself? So this is the ice margin. And then there were these streams flowing off of it to the east, including the Cannon and then the Vermillion. And the Vermillion's getting water from a few different directions there. So when I spoke to the Trout Unlimited group in December, I was focusing on this region where the cold water is kind of coming into the stream in those tributaries. So now I'm looking at a map of Farmington here, the Dakota County boundary, and I was showing you these main tributaries that are kind of this orange color coming in and forming this big sand plain that the Vermillion River occupies. You'll see there's some other kind of colored areas that are similar. There have been other glaciers or other kind of branches of glaciers that are also sending water into Dakota County. So we have a lot of sand actually at the surface in southern Dakota County. So this is the ice margin right at the Scott Dakota County border. And I like to look at this because I live over here and I've driven past this so many times, and until they got these really nice high resolution images, I learned so much from seeing these and then driving it every day. But this, I should know the names of these lakes. What lake is that? It's not Crystal. What's the one south of Crystal?
Marion,
That's
yes.
Marion. So you've got, those are the feeders, and this is Chub Lake coming in here. Those are the feeders for the headwaters of the Vermillion. And what these lakes, they were tunnels in the ice like that. So they were like the big storm drains sending all the water out from under the glacier and shooting it out into the lake plain, the sand plain in front of it. This is the kind of stuff I think about. And some of them actually, when the tunnels get kind of slow and closed up, they form eskers in them. And so some of these tunnels have eskers in them. And if you know where the gravel mining is along I-35, Buck Hill, and then where the movie theater is now, those areas are places where there was either an esker ridge or a fan, a very coarse
The library will
fan
close
here.
in 30 minutes. If you need a ride home, please call for one now. If you need assistance, please come to the service desk. Self-service hours will begin after closing.
This is I-35.
Again, the library will close in 30 minutes.
And this is the sod farms, if you see those on I-35. They're in one of those tunnels.
La biblioteca cerrará en 30 minutos. Si
Ice
necesita
mine here.
que le lleven a su
Gravel
casa,
pits
pídalo ahora.
in Eureka
Si
Township.
necesita ayuda, acuda al mostrador de servicio.
And
Repetimos, la
similarly-
biblioteca cerrará en 30 minutos.
Murphy Hanrahan Park is another one of these tunnels, less distinct, but I'm kind of emphasizing this, and I emphasized it in the Trout Unlimited talk, because these tunnels also erode deeply into the bedrock, and they're places where the water that's held in the glacial sands can be exchanged with the bedrock. And I think it's why we have all of these wetlands and cold water coming up into and forming the headwaters of the Vermillion. These tunnels are the sources, they're windows into the deeper bedrock aquifer. But any place that you have cold water is a place where groundwater is entering the surface water. So let me just show you these thermal images. I showed you that one earlier. This is what that looks like. So it's warmer in the winter, but it's still about 45 degrees. So in our trout stream reaches, which are the bold ones here, here's Farmington, so anything that's bold blue, those are all the temperature of the groundwater, or groundwater temperature mixed with surface water temperature. So we know there's significant water coming from either the glacial sands or from the bedrock through the glacial sands up into the stream. And we also know that just because it's flowing all year round, but there's enough groundwater contribution that it is staying cold. This cross section, let me just show you, it goes approximately, it's a little north of Farmington, but it still represents the general geology of this area. So this is the green is the glacial sediment that I live on, that the glacier deposited directly. Is kind of the texture of concrete right now. It's clayey, it's really hard, water's not moving through it. It even cracks when it gets dry. It gets mud cracks in it. But then if you come off to the edge where the glacier was discharging just sand, then you start getting these big, thick units of sand. And what I want to point out here is that in your area, so here's Highway 52, the sand is in place directly over the bedrock. So it's in contact with that first bedrock unit. And this presents some challenges because it allows you to recharge your aquifer fairly easily, but it also means that these are vulnerable to things that are happening at the surface, and that pumping from down here can impact the water levels here pretty easily. It's just acting as one system. It's all connected. So even if you have a well down here through this, it's going to be experiencing things from here. I'm not explaining that very well, but this is where we get into what authorities does our Department of Natural Resource actually have over this water. They're the ones that are monitoring with all these little dots with the USGS, monitoring water levels in the various aquifers, and they are also the ones issuing the water appropriation permits. So they're supposed to be tracking who's using how much, and if it becomes too much, they can say stop making wells in this aquifer or stop pumping. Until about 2 years ago, they've been allowing most wells to go in without a lot of question. But now they're starting to pay more attention. Actually, it had to do with the lawsuit around the water levels in White Bear Lake. They started changing the way they were issuing permits. So in your area, here we are in the, let's see, Farmington right here. And the golf course is this the golf course here? No, it's right there. All these little dots are private wells. So there are a lot of places where there's potential impact between a large pumping well in Farmington and the wells that are finished in the same aquifer. You're sharing this water. It doesn't end at the Farmington border. And the way interference can potentially happen is a high volume pumping well can temporarily draw down the surface of the water table, whether it's the water table in the water table aquifer or the confined aquifer. It can depress it. And that can be lowered permanently, or at least feels permanently. Sometimes if you stop pumping, this will rebound. But the problem with this is if you have a shallower well, then your well will go dry. Or if you have a well that is down into this area, but your pump is that high in your well, then you will also experience no water. So you might have to lower a pump within your well column. So decreasing the water table will also affect surface water features, as I mentioned. This shows you where existing water users are, and these are scaled to the pumping amounts. So the larger the dot, the more water being used. And we know that there's a lot being used by the metropolitan areas. But there's a lot of irrigation wells in this part of the county too. I think you know that. You've seen that. So the concern about decreasing the contribution, not eliminating, but decreasing the contribution of groundwater to trout streams is that we are also at the same time increasing our impervious surface area. Over by me, the Air Lake Airport, there's a lot of paved surfaces now. There's a lot of big buildings around the airport with roofs and parking lots, and all that water that doesn't soak into the ground is running off at the temperature that it falls, or even heating up as it moves over a dark surface or a metal roof and going into the stream. So that can overwhelm the cold temperature of the trout stream. So in Minnesota, so far, no places are running, well, there's maybe a couple that have run out of water because they had very small, confined sand bodies, like Warren, Minnesota, and the Red River Valley. But for most parts of Minnesota, what we're seeing is seasonal scarcity of water. And that's probably what will happen in this irrigated portion of Dakota County. And you saw, I walked my woods today and the woodland plants were wilting. And when a plant wilts, a farmer will irrigate. And so what we're going to see is probably as temperatures increase and dry spells get longer, we're going to see more irrigation happening. We'll see seasonal scarcity in Dakota County in these sandy areas. It's replenished, it's a bank account, so water is replenished just by rain. And so if we have significant changes in rainfall, we're going to, be drawing more than we're recharging. it looks like from climate projections, these are Great Lakes-wide climate projections. It's blue, so it looks like the total amount of precipitation is about the same. The zero is kind of right here in the middle. But it does look like summer, total precipitation in the summer is going to decrease, and that's the critical time for crops. And it also does look like it's going to get quite a bit hotter, and the number of days between rain events is going to increase. So it looks like irrigation will probably increase. And if you are in a city that has a watering ban in the summer, there's already a little seasonal scarcity in your community. Other concerns with increased pumping are that it can migrate existing contamination. And this is a very minimal map of where contamination actually exists underground. There's a lot more. If you zoom in on your county, you'll see a lot more dots than this shows you. But there is a non-degradation standard in our 1989 Water Protection Act, and we're not supposed to migrate contamination underground, like willfully suck it into a well area, well pumping area. That's hard to do, hard to not do, but it is something that does exist in statute. The contamination that's most common out here at the surface is, and this is from Dakota County's groundwater plan, I think, is nitrate contamination, and Farmington has a little hot spot here. I'm not sure what that's about, but you do have increasing nitrate contamination as you go east into the agricultural areas, and all of this water in the Vermillion drops into the ground right before it reaches Hastings, and Hastings has to really manage the whole Vermillion watershed in order to have drinkable water for their city. This is also an image that was created by Bill Olson at Dakota County. He's retired now, but it's really illustrative of how your surface sand is connected to deeper layers. He's showing you in 1991 what the concentration of nitrate was like at the surface and what it was like 100 feet down and 280 feet down. And then over time, we see more nitrogen being used and more nitrogen kind of expanding in these red blobs, increasing concentrations. But you also see it getting deeper. So it's sinking further into the ground. And whether that is just the natural gradient, and it would naturally go down and get deeper, or if deep wells that are pumping are drawing it down, I think that's a question that maybe Vanessa DeMuth or Valerie Nebel, who are from Dakota County, could answer. But probably both are happening, that you're inducing a gradient by pumping. And if you just look at the sensitivity of the bedrock that you are drawing your water from, it's all red here. That's just because things at the surface will eventually reach the wellhead that you're using. Other concerns with increased pumping include mobilizing harmful geogenic constituents. These are things that are naturally in the rock, like arsenic and manganese. And this is something else that you might have gotten some kits from the county right now to test for these things. Send them in. Talk to Vanessa if you haven't, because she's making sure that people have baseline numbers for their wells before pumping increases, so that we can tell if this is happening, because this happened to the residents of Newmarket Township outside of Elko Newmarket. Arsenic is a carcinogen. Manganese is a neurotoxin. It's especially harmful for infants, but in high levels in adults it can create Parkinson's-like symptoms. And so what happened in Elko Newmarket is that from the pumping from the Niagara water bottling plant, which was over here like a well number 2 in Elko Newmarket, residents it actually increased to a 5-mile radius, started seeing more manganese and arsenic. And Janelle Kuzna, who I'm showing here, had a series of well clinics at the library in Elko Newmarket and has some before and after samples. And so we know that this was actually a change that occurred. So iron, manganese, and in a few cases, arsenic. So I'm going through that list. The final one was, what are societal priorities? What do you think should be done with the groundwater? Well, commonly, it's the members of organizations like the Coalition for Responsible Data Center Construction that are the first to see these impacts, the hyper-local organizations. And sadly, they're not included, usually, because the process is not transparent. This leads to fear and distrust of government at all levels, and it also can perpetuate environmental injustices, like somebody who might not have enough money to deepen their well is going to be the one that bears the brunt of this impact. And if there's no clear governance pathway, what do? It's clear to me from talking to people around the state that they still don't really understand the different responsibilities of the different levels of government. And so how do you navigate this even? This group has resorted to the legal system, but has also sought media attention, went through the formal environmental review process, frustratingly. I mean, that's even hard to fill out those environmental assessment worksheets. And in Elko New Market, there was a lot of protest outside the city hall. But if we could have started with an inclusive bottom-up practice, engaged people early on, which Dakota County does try to do in their well plans, in their groundwater plans, there's less need to revise those plans later. And let me just say that Dakota County, although they have a plan for the county, doesn't have the authority to tell the cities to do certain things. They lack that authority. They can offer guidance. So we're working right now with these 3 towns outside of Rochester, city managers, and we're going to have one more meeting. I've invited Kathy, and I'm inviting you, Mo, to come to this because it's a workshop that's going to be probably at this point over 100 people. But we're trying to get people with every role to talk about what do cities need to know, how should this process actually operate. So in about a month, we're going to have some more, we've been doing research for the whole year. We'll have some information for cities, help them understand how to get their community's priorities, give them a more proactive negotiating position so they can say no to data centers or they can constrain them in ways that are appropriate for their size and their availability of resources, help them figure out how to support regional economic development but still have a secure water and energy future. And I think Mo will talk more about energy. Alternatives to groundwater, I would love to see surface water used instead, or maybe artificial impoundments like the mine pit lakes up on the Iron Range, or reclaimed water. In Rosemont, there's a air traffic control building that has to pump continuously from the basement so it doesn't get wet, and so maybe using water that's already being pumped.
The library will close in 15 minutes. Please check out material
And
complete
then
computer work and
reusing
printing.
water, however, is
The library
hard to
will
do in
close in
Minnesota.
15
I'll
minutes.
skip by that. The problem with
La biblioteca
Not
cerrará
using
en 15
water.
minutos. Tome prestado el material y completa el trabajo con el ordenador y la impresión.
I'm just trying to brush
La
up on my
biblioteca
Spanish.
cerrará en 15 minutos.
I think we're worried about the highest potential water use of things going in because we don't often hear the details of what the design is going to be. There are low water ways to cool chips. Cooling is all they're doing with this water. But it's like air conditioning, it's a high electricity use. I don't know if you heard about the Pine Island plant, but Google is going to use electricity for cooling down there, and they're going to use batteries. But it's going to use 11% of the state's electricity. So there can't be many of those. Yeah, 11% of the current electric usage. So there can't be very many of those. So we're working right now actively every day on trying to fill this governance gap. I think one thing you can potentially do, probably have tried, is with these watershed management organizations, they've already hammered out the way they work across political boundaries. Scott and Dakota counties in these cities are part of the BRW-JPO, I know the acronym, and they are governing not just the surface water, but they're governing the way water connects from the surface to the ground. So really, they have to start thinking more about one water, the groundwater and surface water, as one water system. So I think it's possible to lean into the political strengths of these organizations. I know it's a frustrating group, so I'll say that. There are some, I don't think I'll even talk about this, but there's some companies that are trying to come in and say they're going to conserve water, be good stewards, and they're trying to sell water credits on the open market. So, yeah, so there's some of the larger companies are following some volumetric water benefit accounting practices that have been developed, and yeah, that's happening. But we can expect more large water users, and we're trying to get the state agencies to make the groundwater data more available. We're trying to get people to engage across their political jurisdictions, cities to consult stakeholders beyond their city boundaries. and the states to incentivize or require circular water design and transparency. That didn't happen. The Attorney General has a water task force that's still deliberating. We hope that maybe the Attorney General will come up with some ways to get the agencies to do what they're supposed to do, and also to deal with environmental injustices that are coming around. And then the other thing we're working on right now is a water risk atlas for Minnesota. I had a meeting with my team today. So there's a global atlas that large companies are using, the Amazons and the Google are using to cite their businesses. But we think that we can do a lot better than that. We can do better than what the DNR is providing to DEED right now. And so we're creating a structure for a user-friendly map using existing data that you hopefully you can click on. I've got some end users in my advisory team that are just regular people that are going to see if this map would suit the uses that your community needs. So I better stop talking because the library's going to close and most will have to talk.
We have extended.
Okay.
Should we do the Q&A now?
Well, let him talk. That's a lot of questions. Sorry, I should have closed that.
So my area is going to be a bit different. Maybe there is a little bit of commonality. We had a short presentation to the Trout Unlimited about a couple weeks ago. We had a 5-minute presentation to see if there was interest to come in. So this is primarily for them, but I'm very glad that we see other people here as well, because as Dr. Jennings said, this goes far beyond just Farmington or this local area. So I'll be talking more about what's happening in Farmington, and then from there go to broader state level. But this is the project proposed for Farmington, includes the golf course as well as the area below it that is farm now. That area belongs to the school district. That was where initially they were planning to build the high school, but then with the new one closer to, on the west side, closer to Lakeville, this was available. So as you can see, there are quite a few residential neighborhoods here, including there are areas above this that are building brand new homes, $500,000, $600,000 homes, that are people moving in thinking that they're moving into a quiet section of Farmington. So we found about this, the notice went only to people living within 350 feet. So there were people in one side of the street that got the notice, and other people on the other side of the street did not get the notice. So when we found out, we went to a number of planning commission meetings, the city council meeting, but despite what we said, they went ahead and approved the project anyway. And I'm sorry, right here, this was a recommendation made to the city council saying that this project unit development creates harmony with existing surrounding uses, the majority of which are agriculture and industrial, with some low-density residential. So when you look at this, with all these residential, how could somebody say that? And there was only one council member that said, hey, let's slow down, investigate this a little bit more, even ask the city if there is any zoning or parameters for data centers. And the answer to him was no. But even with that request, this was approved 4-1. So what you see is this whole area today is golf course, is all green, and this area is being farmed, and here is the south branch of Vermillion. And this is what's going to go there. 2.5 million square foot of buildings, and even more impervious surfaces around those buildings to house the generators, some of the other cooling facilities, other activities that they would do. And again, now, the river here, they own the land on both sides. They are, let me go to the next. So this is what happens when you have a green area and the water can go into shallow area and also do deep infiltration. But when you put concrete in there, there's a lot less water, and then your runoff, typically around 10%, when you have a golf course or a farm, and 55% would do a runoff. So all of this is near Vermillion, South Branch of Vermillion River. So they had done a study to see as the temperature rises between grass and asphalt. And concrete is a little bit better, but not a whole lot. And what happens with asphalt, as time goes on, asphalt gets lighter, exposure to sunlight, so it holds less heat, but concrete gets dirtier and darker. So concrete at some point becomes just as bad as asphalt. So this is 9 o'clock in the morning, temperature 81, grass, asphalt, they're both 81. As time goes on, air temperature goes up, but you'll see 85 there, air temperature, the grass is 86, asphalt has already gone to 95. So by the end of the day, at 5 o'clock, air temperature was 100, but the grass 104, and the asphalt surface temperature 149. Now, why is that important? If you put something that large, not far from a Trout River, that would have an impact. So, a little bit more information about that. The data center is a spec that's 708 megawatts of
The
power.
library will close in 5 minutes. This is your last call for checkout. If you are planning to stay for self-service hours, you will need to exit the building at closing and scan your access card to re-enter the library.
Let's do the next one and then we'll get
La
to it.
biblioteca cerrará en 5 minutos. Esta es su última llamada para retirarse. Si tiene previsto quedarse durante el horario de autoservicio, deberá retirarse del edificio en el momento del cierre y escanear su tarjeta de acceso para volver a ingresar a la biblioteca.
So 708 megawatts of power. To back that up, you need 236 3 megawatt diesel generators. Each one comes with 6,100 gallon of diesel fuel. So multiply these two together, you get over 1.4 million gallons of diesel. And if you put one of these, use one of these to transport, that translates to 160 tanker trucks. If you line them up, it'll be 1.6 miles of tanker trucks to provide diesel to those generators. So what happens to the river? Number one, you got lots of buildings, hard surfaces around those. These dark areas, these are the buildings. These are the hard surfaces around it for generators, cooling towers, things like that. And there are some water retentions, BMP's best practices management, that they would hold the water, but as you can see, some of these are very close to the river. So these are to trap the sediments that will come in and hopefully treat it. But if you have a hard rain, I don't know what the capacity is or how quickly can they overflow the capacity here. And they are setting these buildings at the 100-year flood, And frankly, I don't know if that's to protect the river or reduce the insurance because they're building so close to the river. And then because these are 50 to 80 foot tall buildings, very large buildings, they need significant foundation, so they need to de-water. This is very shallow area. There's even areas here that they've given back to the city and the states to preserve. But the challenge is when you build the foundation and you have to de-water, and I don't know if at some point, once the buildings are built, they need to do continual de-watering. And that close to the river, that would have a big impact. And then these usually have 2 rows of fences. So honestly, at this point, they have not said if people can access the river here. Today, there is no restriction. You can walk there and fish all you want, but if this is a sensitive data center, that access may be taken away. So the big question for this guy is why would somebody park 1.4 million gallons of diesel fuel year-round so close to this poor guy's habitat? So as you all know, the temperature 40 to 50 is where they really do well. And this is a very precious river. I think across the state, it's an envy of the area. And with this concrete jungle there, we know the water temperature is going to go up and stress the fish. And so I've talked to folks at Trout Unlimited, Ichigami chapter, and they are using the temperature loggers to monitor. So this is something that hopefully with the help from your organization we'll be able to do, put them on the west and the east side of the river, and so that we can monitor, establish a baseline so that we'll have some data here when the construction gets further along.
The library is now closed. All customers, including self-service hours cardholders, must exit the building.
There was a talk about
After closing, self-service customers may scan their access
actually
cards to
leaching
re-enter.
and coming into the water. So the Department of Health.
La biblioteca ya está cerrada. Todos los usuarios, incluidos los titulares de una tarjeta de horario de autoservicio, deben retirarse del edificio. Tras el cierre, los usuarios de autoservicio pueden escanear sus tarjetas de acceso y ingresar nuevamente.
So the Minnesota Department of Health just last month issued this warning about fish taking out of Vermillion River, all the way in Scott County and Dakota County. So this includes a fairly large area. So if you're in a compromised group, they want you to have no more than 1 serving, and then for other people to limit to 4 servings of fish, because we already are seeing this problem. So if you have a large groundwater user, this becomes even more of an issue. Data centers cause issues that needs to be taken into account in many areas. I'm not going to go into the detail. The water and electricity are 2 of the main concerns, because the amount of significant amount of energy they need causes water use to generate that electricity, so it becomes critical. So those will be the 2 items that are covered. These are some of the data centers that are coming in. There are a couple that have been canceled, but they never go away. You know, like the one in Apple Valley, they came last year, they came again this year, and once they find an area, I call those zombie data centers, that they never go away. The developers keep coming back. The yellow areas is what I projected the use would be, because they don't make them any larger than necessary. So, and there are more. These are the ones we know about because the specs have been developed and submitted to the state, but there are others that could be there we don't know about. You already saw that, this about the priority. Now, why do they go to the cities? Again, because they can get around the DNR regulation. That's what happened in Farmington. And the city has obligated itself, they signed a contract with the developer that they would give them the water out of the city water. So when that happens, the city has water restrictions with the citizens. You can't wash your car on even days, but a data center operates 7 by 24, 365. You cannot tell the data center, hey, you got to shut off, you got to turn off, because they have service level agreements with their customers, and if they don't abide to the service level, there are financial impacts to that. So if the city obligates itself contractually, they need to provide that water. So to the citizens, they say, you can't have the water or restrict your water use, but data center keeps going on. And when a majority of their water use happens in the summer, when everybody needs water. There is this one case in North Mankato. There is even a statute at the state level that it says, Commissioner may not issue new water use permit that will appropriate water from the Simon Hinckley Aquifer unless it is for potable water use. So one of the largest data centers is planned to go there. So when DNR reminded them of that fact, the city came back and said, the city of North Mankato is in the process of lobbying legislator to amend the state statute and allow for use of this aquifer for industrial use. So the state went through the trouble saying, hey, this is for drinking water. You cannot use it, but the city is trying to go lobby the state and say, hey, change the rules so we can take the water. Now we're going into energy. So I had...
Welcome to self-service hours. Enjoy this extra time to utilize our resources. And please remember to be respectful of the space and other customers. Self-service hours will end at 11
You
o'clock.
set us very well for this.
Bienvenido al horario de autoservicio. Disfruta de este tiempo adicional para utilizar nuestros recursos y recuerde ser respetuoso con el espacio y con los demás usuarios. El horario de autoservicio finalizará a las 11.
Okay, so your power, there are power plants, some of them are in a state, some of them are in other states or even Canada that we buy power from. Mid-continent, MISO operates the grid. If you look at power grid like a highway system, these big transmission lines are like the big highways run by the state. And then distribution, this is the lines that, power lines that come to your home. So this is like the road system that the city manages. And then the pool of energy is everything coming from these power plants that put the power in to be used by Dakota Electric or other power companies. Somebody like Xcel, they buy power and they also generate power and dump it in this pool. So what happens is when the power demand goes up, there are a lot of bidders for this pool of power. So think about a cattle auction. When there are a lot of people that want to buy cattle, what happens? The price of cattle goes up. Or the stock market, when a lot of people want to buy NVIDIA stocks, then their stock price goes up. So here's a bill from Dakota Electric. So out of the bill, 51% goes to power generation. So that's that big pool of power. 16% of your bill goes towards transmission, that's the highway system, and 33% goes towards distribution. Now what happens in summer, we are going to go hit this pretty soon, because there's demand for air conditioning and other activities. Dakota's Electric already is going to start charging you more. 14.90 cents per kilowatt hours in June, July, August, and then if the demand goes up other times in the year, they're going to charge a little less. So this shows that when the demand goes up for the power, you pay more for the power. So let's look at why there is such a big demand for the power. I looked at Minnesota population projections. As you can see, from 2024 to 2074, it's fairly flat. In fact, after 2038, number of deaths are projected to be higher than number of births. So the growth is for other people coming into the state. And there are not too many people that want to come into Minnesota. You know, maybe from Iceland or Dakotas. And then our rate of population growth keeps going down. And sometimes in 2061, even with people coming in, our rate is going to go below zero. So the big question is, who are we building all these power plants for if our population is not growing? They keep telling us there is a Badger link, Gopher Badger link that they're trying to propose for southern Minnesota. Its only purpose is really to provide power to Pine Island Google's data center. But they're selling it as, oh, this is going to help people, this is going to help farmers, and this is going to improve the grid. In fact, nobody down there needs improvement in the grid. The locals are very good. Some of the counties, Houston County, the population growth is negative already. And so it's very obvious they're building this for the data centers. This is not for large number of people coming into the state. In fact, this chart just came in this morning. I got this from I think it's the Bureau of Statistics, Census Bureau. Population growth everywhere in the country is going down. This is Midwest. This is for large cities. We're going from 23, 24, 0.6 to 0.2. Population going down for large cities, for medium cities, and even the small ones. Northeast part of the country, south of the country, west of the country. Our population is going on. So who are, again, throughout the country, we're not building these for people. So when you saw the chart here, that we have been paying for the transmission lines, and now we're going to pay extra money. This is what we are paying for, we have paid for, and we continue to pay for, but it is being used by somebody that's coming in and using an energy that we're told we're going to need and is going to benefit all of us. So what can you do to help? If our request to our friends at Trout Unlimited is if you can help us monitor the temperature so we can establish a baseline so we can have something to go back to the city or go back to the DNR as a proof that this large industrial development is going to impact the river, it would be awesome. And also, please get involved in your local government unit. You know, we tried, we went to the planning commission, they weren't listening. You know, they acted, they were looking at us, but we weren't making an impact. We went to the council meetings, city council meetings, no impact. So our recourse was to sue the city, and it's been difficult, but we're not doing this just for Farmington. At the beginning, maybe that was the case, but as we learn more and more, as the impact on the aquifer and these data centers, the noise, the very low frequency hum can travel for miles, so it's not even confined to our neighborhood. It'll go all the way to other areas. That amount of diesel fuel sitting there, you can't keep diesel too long, so you got to replenish it. Those generators are not just used during power emergencies. To make sure they're running, you have to run them continually. The maintenance schedule is, depending on how important they are, once a week, once a month, and as you go higher and higher in between, you run it for many hours. When you do quarterly, you do probably an hour and a half to 2 hours, you keep those running. And when you got 236 of them, you can't run them just one at a time. It'll take weeks. So you're going to run some of them at the same time. So think about the pollution and the noise that'll generate. So the impact goes far beyond Farmington. So that's why we get engaged. We are having these meetings to let folks know that this is a much larger issue than just Farmington. And we have a lot of information on our website. Please go there, take a look. And any other suggestions that you have, we'd be more than happy to listen, and we need support from the larger groups in the organizations. Thank you very much.
We have some time for some questions.
I can help with that one. We need to start.
All right, do we have any questions?
Mo, could you flip back to that list of communities where the data centers are scheduled or are being built?
Okay, one moment here. We've got a couple of microphones. I'm going to be passing these around so people can use them. But if you talk straight in, that's the only way we're going to hear you too. So if you want to repeat. Yeah.
Mo, I'm going to ask again, because now I have a microphone. Can you go back to the slide that showed the list of communities and cities?
Sure.
Thank you. Can you just back up?
Oh, I think I
No, I just wanted to. So I have
Yes, go ahead.
well, my question is about the one in Cannon Falls.
Yes.
I can't, is that one under,
I can say something about that one.
okay.
Yeah, I know more about that one.
So that one actually followed a fairly open process. It's going to go south of County Road 86. So if you take 86 all the way towards Cannon Falls, east of 52, and west of Cannon Falls. If you come into Cannon Falls that back way, and there's that like little dairy, you know, where you get onion rings and ice cream. It's in that general industrial area on the northwest side of Cannon Falls. It goes down to about the river. It's not super huge. They limited the amount of water. When they were dealing with the developer, they negotiated well, and they said you could only use this much water, this much electric. They never signed an NDA. The city manager who's there now walked into the process as it was underway, but it still feels like it was more transparent than what's happening here. They are annexing or did annex part of Randolph Township in Dakota County to do this work, so it's not completely within city limits. It's not as hemmed in as this is, because 52 is on the west side and 86 is on the north, if that helps.
It does. Thank you.
Other questions?
Where's the old Lakeville? The Lakeville?
Didn't Lakeville say no?
That was proposed. I don't know if it was just a storage, battery storage facility, but I can look in the project spec and let you know where that is. If you could give me your information, I can forward that to you.
Question on the water. One of the lawsuits that MCEA has. You know, Lakeville's one of the cities that are suing, so there is something planned here.
Question on the water utilization. It says utilization of well, using the Farmington one as an example, but any of them I guess you could answer for. Over 2.5 million gallons per day of use, then there's less than 1 million sanitary discharge. Where's the rest of it going?
There are a couple of areas that the water, what you see, the discrepancy between the two. Inside of the computer rooms, they need to maintain a certain level of humidity, otherwise you get static electricity that damages the electronics. So they inject humidity into the facility. And also when you use water evaporative systems, some of it gets evaporated that way. So that's why you have the two numbers that are, the discharge is lower.
So there is no discharge, say, into that example, into the Vermillion River, or where is it all going?
Empire wastewater treatment plant. It has to go to wastewater treatment plant. But these numbers are probably not the real numbers because the developer comes in, they don't even know who the end user is necessarily. They don't know the design of the system. So they give these kind of wide-ranging numbers. That was one of the problems early on. Tract was kind of famous for saying, it could be this, it could be this. We really don't know. We can't nail it down. It's proprietary. So that's part of the problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to add to that, if you get secure as much water as you can, then you can open up the facility, especially with the developers. Then you can open it up to Bitmine, the Bitcoin miners, and whoever that has lower or antiquated cooling technology. So there is an incentive to get as much water requested and signed up for, so that then you can open yourself up to a bigger audience and users. Yeah.
Well, I got a question. I have a question. So, most of the cooling that they're proposing right now,
Yes.
some of them have mentioned that they're going to be using, evaporative or diffusion, like mist, to cool down the processes. But they've always been a technology where it's liquid cooled, like
Sure.
like we have in our processors.
Sure.
But it's costly, and none of these companies want to disclose that they're going to do which one, because evaporation or mist is much cheaper for them, but it takes more, it uses much water, just like this gentleman said, where they're utilizing water instead of cooling, like
Sure.
direct chip cooling. But I haven't heard any developers saying that that's what they're going to use going in the future.
Okay.
Have you guys heard of any of these facilities that may be proposing to do so?
Yes, the one in Rosemont, which is a Meta data center, they claim that they would use up to 15,000, about 15,000 gallons of water, a maximum of 100,000, because they're using a closed loop system. What happens, as Dr. Jennings mentioned, when you use those other technologies, they use a lot more electricity, and it takes significantly more water to generate that electricity. So you fix or hide the problem in one area, or you fix the problem in one area, but then you cause a problem somewhere else. So net, I think some of these technologies, more advanced technologies, which are expensive, they look good, but you pay the price somewhere else. So it defers the price to power generation and has some of the other issues regarding chemicals and things that they have to put in to treat that closed loop system environment. Dr. Jennings, anything you want to add in that area?
I have a question of what's the status of the Farmington build at this point? And with doing the temperature sensing on the river, what's the recourse if you detect a temperature change? Like, what can we do?
I think if we can prove that there is a change in temperature because that area is a significant feeding or habitat for the trout, especially as the weather gets hotter and the temperature gets hotter. So I think we may have recourses.
Yeah.
If you'd like to add to that.
So there are certain features that have special protection in Minnesota. That is a designated trout stream. It has special protection. That is one of the few places where the DNR is willing to step in and talk about water appropriation and impacts to ecosystems. So trout streams, fens would be in the headwaters area. The DNR has authority that they do exercise over trout stream protection. Now, I suppose somebody could undesignate it, say it's no longer a trout stream. It's close to its thermal maximum, so there are probably ways for them to get around that, but that is the reason to do that. And I do think there's already been a lot of thermal monitoring by the Watershed Management Organization. I've seen some of the data, and you can actually see one thing that was kind of telling was how fast groundwater flows into the bottom of the stream. They used a 50-gallon drum with a rubber glove over the hole, the fill hole at the top, and the opening was cut open at the bottom. And the glove would kind of do this when groundwater was flowing into it. Have you seen those videos? So that you can see groundwater actively coming into the bottom of the Vermillion River. You can measure that upward movement of it, and you can measure the temperature very easily.
Well, I have one more question.
Question for Dr. Jennings. Water, is it considered a finite resource?
Is water considered a finite resource? It is. It is a finite resource, but I think more importantly, in whatever is in statute, it's connected. It's impact. If you impact other water users, and that includes the ecosystems, then we have laws to protect those people. I mean, it's a recycled resource, but there is a finite amount on the planet.
The last question asks, what's the status of Farmington data center? So I was going to have you answer that. I didn't hear an answer to
Yeah,
that.
use a mic.
Kathy, you probably know. I don't know where the And then our coalition usually puts these slides up on our website. So I think we're planning to do that again?
I don't know the status. Where you are.
No, I mean
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
the slide deck on the thingy. I think you can answer that.
The status of the data center in Farmington is they're going ahead full speed, like we don't even have a lawsuit against them. A lawyers from Trout last couple meetings have said at the city council, we're moving, we're committed to this, and we're going to be good neighbors, and we're going to move full ahead with this, but the coalition has a lawsuit against them, and I can do a couple closing comments. Did you want to ask a question first?
Well, it's related to Farmington, but it's the other, the status of Project Bengal.
Bengal, I think, we have been told that Bengal is no longer, but I go back to what Mo said about zombie data centers, because I read somewhere in the minutes or the proposed agenda for our coming up planning commission that they're looking at some zoning changes on Highway 50 and the area between.
I saw that, and those are smaller. They're not that large. So
Yeah.
I think it's-
Well, I
I'll
just
see
keep
that.
saying, I've heard that Bengal's pretty much, Opadon was the developer there and that they've pulled out, but Openon's the company that came in and out of Apple Valley a couple times, so I'd say you have to keep an eye. Okay, we're gonna hang out for a little while afterwards. If you have more questions, you're welcome to stay and talk to any of us. But I just want to thank Dr. Jennings and Feshami for a great presentation. Really appreciate your knowledge. Minnesotans, in a way, have a lifestyle that's the envy of a lot of other people. It's a great place to raise a family. We have amenities like the Trout stream that's so close to where people live that they can just walk down and access at any time. Our state's cleaner than most other states. The quality of life is the reason people come here and stay here, and all of this is under attack. The well-known phrase accurately says, the water and the earth are not ours. We are borrowing it from our children. But predatory developers like Trout are not borrowing it, they're taking it. And they're taking it from all of us and from the future generations, where ample water, clean air, skies, and the sounds of wildlife used to be. They will be leaving us bankrupt. There are currently no active protections for Minnesota citizens in the legislature or the executive branch which affect the impact of hyperscalers, especially in situations like Farmington, that's brought on by a local governing body that refuses to listen to its constituents. All that was left to us is the judiciary, where hyperscalers are proposing a data center that now sits in limbo, awaiting the outcome of a trial. Please note that our trial has been pushed back an entire year. We're still going to be fighting this for another till May of 2027. But in the last 2 years, the CRDCD, the Coalition for Responsible Data Center Development, have been advocating for the preservation for the community, for our homes and for yours, and for the abundant natural resources that we have, like the Vermillion River, which is one of the only naturally breeding trout streams in a metropolitan area in our country. The quality of the life that we are share, we're driven by our knowledge of facts, research that we've done across multiple communities in the United States. We see it all. It's all around us. Life changes for people in parts of the country where data centers have come in. Precious resources have fallen prey to the whims of developers and end users. And our coalition has made connections with people in many other communities, and we know that Farmington's going to end up being just like them. If we do nothing about it, these are the facts that the Farmington city officials are refusing to acknowledge. We are currently in our lawsuit in the discovery phase. And typically that's the most expensive part of the lawsuit. It involves time-consuming information exchange, often accounting for 40 to 90% of the total litigation cost. It requires extensive attorney time for reviewing documents, for preparing depositions, and for managing complex electronic data. Depositions can be $5,000 to $25,000. Taking and defending depositions is very expensive. Expert witness, we may well have to hire someone to review evidence and testify, and there's always, that can be $5,000 to $50,000. And discovery disputes, if the parties don't agree, then our attorneys have to file what's called a motion to compel, and other protective orders, $5,000 to $25,000. But because discovery is designed to ensure that by the time you get to trial, there's no surprises, it's a massive multi-month-long process that requires a high volume of information. Without our lawsuit, it is 100% that the tract is going to build a data center in Farmington. But we are not defeated because we are the furthest along. This is why Farmington is so important. We are the furthest along in the state of Minnesota of a developer-led project. Meta with the city of Rosemont. We have a pernicious developer who's trying to maximize their dollars, and that puts us in a different situation. If we are able to, and when we are able to, stand together to defeat Trout and the city of Farmington, it will be impact litigation for the state. It will be precedent setting. Our counts have to do with zoning, our counts have to do with the environment, and that will impact every city across the state of Minnesota. As we enter the discussion, or the discovery phase, we are at a crossroads. And I ask you about your worldview tonight. Do you want to be idle and just let big tech determine what life should look like in our cities? We've already raised as a coalition over $100,000 in the last 2 years. And we need to do that much again in the next year. And we can do that if we all stand together. If we broaden the base of people who care about things like the Vermillion River and the quality of life that we enjoy here in Minnesota. If they look at this to be the incompatible project in a residential community that it is. I'm asking you to be like the villagers in the folk story Stone Soup. They came together and each contributed what they could to the pot. And the result was a hearty soup that the whole community enjoyed. We can show that working together for the greater good accomplishes more than any one person could possibly accomplish alone. If the coalition's lawsuit is not funded, the coalition's lawsuit is not funded by people with deep pockets. It's funded by regular people just like you and me. And we are currently in the most expensive part of our lawsuit. Tonight, I'm asking you to consider your worldview and what you value about life in our community, in the region, and in the state. I know what my choice is and my family's choice is, and I know what the choice has been for so many in our community already. I'm asking you to become part of the base, that broad base that contributes to our legal funds. If you've already contributed, I'm asking you to contribute again so that we can take this lawsuit to the finish line and send a message to big tech developers and naive local governing units about what we cherish most in our community. Stand together and be part of a broad base by donating to our legal funds and be just like those villagers who achieved more collectively than what was imaginable. Be part of the win, which we can achieve together, and it will be a win for all of us. In the back table, you'll see lots of information, but you'll also see some half sheets like this. The coalition is both a 401c3 and a 401c4. The 401c3 has only one icon on it, so you can pick out that sheet more easily. It's tax deductible. It goes for the environmental part of our lawsuit. The 501c4 has two icons, including a QR code. And we have more flexibility as to how we can spend that money. It's toward a broader base, but 100% of it goes to our legal fund. We, as members, fund things like our printing costs and room rentals. 100% of what we raise goes to our legal fees. And but this one is not tax deductible. So if that's important to you, but please consider taking one of the half sheets from the back table and stand with us and be part of the win for all of us here in Minnesota. And we're here for more Q&A if anybody has comments. And thank you very much for your attention to this important matter.
I'd like to add one more comment to what Kathy said. Twice the city of Farmington went to the judge and said this should be thrown out. And each time the judge said that it has merits and it should go ahead. So it is, our case does have merit and has the judge's blessing to proceed to the discovery phase and go on.